No, but I will be by 9 o'clock. So even before you ask.
Yeah, I thought of that.
Yeah, you're 9 instead of 11 or 12.
I thought about that. Yeah.
Good.
Yes. Market Island.
Sorry. You thought you were the front row, you got sold out. Hopefully I learned. Thank you.
I'm trying to text you.
We're just gonna leave back there. And they have like
I would think that would have ruined
great. Sunday we went to Paradise, cut across the Brimway. Down to Bay or Cedarville. Back up over there. Right as it goes.
All right, everybody, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We all rise for the pledge. pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
John Leo. Here. Al Deka. Here. Nancy Rondell.
Here.
Matt Bugera.
Here.
John Cox. We do have a quorum.
Very good. All right, and time for citizens' comment. If you have something you'd like to address us about that's not on the agenda tonight, this is your opportunity. Right. Perfect. Computer, looks like it.
Is the power plant on the agenda?
It is.
Okay.
Wait your turn. All right, well, there's no citizens' comment. We'll move right into the consent agenda. Any issues at the table?
Good to me.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
John Cox. Al Deka.
Yes.
John Leo. Yes. Matt Bugera.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Excellent. Very much. And, Officer Timmons.
All right, yeah, welcome. So Chief Knight will take over here, but Officer Steve Timmons, who's right there in the back, has been with the city for 38 years and is retired, so bring it on.
So I knew, Steve meant a lot to me, and I realized, I'm glad you're all here to celebrate his retirement. So this is one phenomenal officer right here. So a little bit about Steve. He graduated from East Jordan High School in 1978. Went on to the Regional Police Academy in Kalamazoo and graduated from that in 1983. Worked for East Jordan Police Department part-time for a while, and then started up here full-time September 3rd of 1984 at a whopping wage of $9.96. So he served up here ever since that, 1994. Steve is one of those officers for me that knew everybody in town. He'd been here a long time, he met a lot of you, and if I needed advice, he was that person. A lot of police officers don't make it 38 years in law enforcement period. Most of them 25 and they're out, let alone to go 38 years at one police department. So that's a tribute to Steve. You find that a rarity nowadays where somebody lasts at a department for 38 years. While they say everybody can be replaced, he's that person that I'm going to have the difficulty replacing. Therefore, I'm glad that you're all here because I need 5 more officers. Steve is that person. Steve is irreplaceable. Him and I, he's prepared me for this for like the last 2 years. You know, sooner or later I'm going to retire. Sooner or later I'm going to retire. We've been game plan a little bit. Just to give you an idea, Steve took care of our in-car and our body cameras. He did our portable radios. He programmed them. He trained us. He did the portable, all the traffic speed signs that you see throughout the city. That he took care of that. He did the locking system for the city hall and for the police department. He was our firearm or rifle instructor. He was our taser instructor. Lean, which is like the Secretary of State Information, who was our security officer for that. I know I'm going to miss him. And he did all the computer work, most of the computer work, definitely for our police department, as well as for City Hall. I know I'm missing something, but that's just a little bit of what he did. And I have to replace that with one person, and he's that person. In addition, when I started up here in 17, it was like our department organization is myself, and then there's 6 police officers. We have no sergeant. That's who we have. And Steve's always been that person to me that I could go to in confidence and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And Steve's been that person. We shared a lot, and he's made sure that I didn't do the wrong thing. He's provided me an awesome amount of guidance. So the other day, it was his last day, work day, and I wasn't here, and I was very sad about that. But that Friday when I left, I got emotional because there's certain people in your career you run across that they mean the world to you, and that's Steve to me. I came here, he took me under his wing, he gave me the guidance, and when I went on vacation, he was our officer in charge, and I could go anywhere and know that things were going to run smoothly because Steve was that person. And it's sort of like he knew how to do it, he knew when to do it, he knew why we did it. That was a big thing. He knew why we did something. And I can't thank Steve enough. He's got a great job with the schools now. I've been trying to encourage him to do that for a while, and all of a sudden, God works in mysterious ways, and he gave him this job at the schools. The nice thing is, I can still phone a friend, and I'm gonna use them. I might have to buy him some $50 gift card somewhere, but we'll take care of it. But I just wanted to congratulate publicly Steve. 38 years in law enforcement, one agency is phenomenal, and a tribute to Steve. So I just wanted to say in front of all of you guys, thanks for your service.
Great. All right, so next item on the agenda is city budget and operations misinformation presentation. So over the last couple of weeks, residents have been coming to us with several requests to clarify false facts that they received in the mail, some misinformation and some incorrect misinformation, and some that's been out of context. So city staff, early last week, Nick Whitaker, city clerk, Jeff Grimm, our city assessor and zoning administrator, went through some of the misinformation. We put together a presentation to distribute to the residents via the website and on social media, as well as present to council. So everyone has the facts from, as we know it, from the government perspective here on the budget. And so before people make decisions, we want them to make decisions based on facts and not on incorrect information. So it's kind of unfortunate that this day and age, city staff is, and all my staff can attest to this, we are pumping so much time and money into correcting misinformation by a handful of people. And that's preventing us from doing our other main tasks, other main duties. So I hope this doesn't continue, but we will continue combating misinformation as best as we can, but we only have limited resources to do it. So this is one way to do it. So we'll start, I'll go through it, but if you have any questions, city clerk Nick Whitaker, he's also the city treasurer, he's over there, other end of the table. Jeff Grimm, city assessor and zoning administrator, is here as well to answer any questions, and we'll do our best. So some have received these letters in the mail and other places, and that's where we've taken some of the claims that you'll see in the presentation. The first claim that we have here is that, well, it's a question, how much will property taxes increase without the Headley? Right here we have a section of claims, and then this is the city's city facts. So the claim is that property taxes will increase by 6.7% in 2023 without an override, 5% under Headley and 1.7% approved by council in June 2022, or that Headley override will add $0.5 to the tax rate annually, which is additional 8.7% of taxes, and that the override is a 37% tax increase after 5 years and 60 to 70% higher after 5 years. Well, the first clarification there is that the city did not approve a 1.7% increase of property tax in June of 2022. Rather, what that was a truth and taxation hearing, which prevents the city's tax rate from decreasing by 4%. So this was noticed as required. It was in the newspaper on the city website. The city determined initially that it needed to levy 6.01 mils for the 2022 year. However, the Headley rollback and proposal A brought that down to 5.6995. The rule is if that you don't hold a public hearing, the county can force you to bring that back down to 5.4727. So what we decided to do was, like we do every year, is hold a public hearing so we can authorize levy the maximum that's allowed per statute. So that's what that is. There was no 1.7% increase by city council in June. The other part here is the state of Michigan applies an inflation rate multiplier each year. It's called the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. CPI for 2022 was 3.3%, and the state has a limitation of 5%. We have no idea what that will be for next year, but right now it's at 3.3%. And a Headley override, finally, the way we have it proposed, will not automatically add 0.5 mils to the tax rate every year. Council must hold a public hearing and determine if a tax increase is necessary and how much, up to 0.5 mils that year. So there's no automatic 0.5 mils every year for the next 5 years. So how much will property taxes increase? City portion of tax city portion of the taxes would increase by about 8.7%. Yes, that's true for the city portion, if it were to go up 0.5 mils in a year. The overall effect on your overall property tax bill for a homestead resident is about 1.7%, and for a non-homestead resident, it's about 1.2%, which is about $53 a year for half the houses or less. If the city, for some reason, does approve 0.5 mils every year until we get to that 8.0 mils, the overall tax bill would increase by 7.3% for a homestead property, 5% for a second homeowner, which is less than a total of $240 increase over the next 5 years for half of the homes in the city. However, Headley will automatically decrease, and this is something we've mentioned several times, will automatically decrease the city's maximum authorized millage rate should property values increase, meaning the city would not even be able to go to 8.0 mils even if it wanted to. And again, the city would only go to 8.0 mils if it absolutely needed to. I don't think anyone in council has yet said anything about going to 8.0 mils. It's about having the flexibility to adjust our millage rate on an annual basis based on services that are needed and an increase in costs. So this, what we have here is an example of the allocation of your tax bill. So you see where your taxes, let's say your total tax millage rate is 28.6. You'll see for a PRE, a principal resident exempted property, you see how much goes to the county, 4.85 goes to the county. You got the senior citizen, a Medicare, ambulance, EMS, 911. The city portion is 5.7461 this year for your general operating funds and about 0.95 for the street millage. And you see down here what a second homeowner versus a homesteader pays in total tax rate, 28.6 mils right now for a principal resident exemption, and then about 42 mils for a second homeowner. Again, this is just a breakdown. It's a little harder to see, but a breakdown of the increase that we talked about in the previous slide of how much your taxes would go up in a year if it was increased by 0.5 mils. So there's also been this misconstruction. The city has been spending money like crazy in the past few years, and that is false. So some of the allegations here with city spending has created our alleged problem. The city is recklessly spending. Harbor Springs has a spending problem. Financial woes are attributed to the fiscal responsibility of city council manager and city clerk. City spending $8 for every $1 in new tax revenue. Well, in the last 3 years, the city has spent less than it should be spending for the necessary and desired operations. And it has not been able to save for necessary improvements to infrastructure. Actually, from 2019 to 2022, general fund spending has decreased on average 1.4% annually, whereas from 2016 to 2019, general fund spending increased 12.4% annually. So this green line right here shows city expenditures. 2016 to 2019, city expenditures increased by an average, as I mentioned earlier, 12%. From 2019 to 2022, city spending has decreased. So this idea that the city council and city administration have been recklessly spending is not based on any facts. It's not based on, especially in comparison to previous city governments, it's not rooted in any truth. So if you see, one of the big problems we have with Headley, and this is something that we've pointed out to several people, especially on council here, is that this red line right here, this is an increase in our taxable value. As you can see, that line is pretty steep. In the last few years, taxable value has been increasing, which is a good thing. But Headley rolls back how much revenue, how much we actually see in tax revenue from that value. This blue line is not increasing as steeply as that red line. So yes, we are seeing some inflationary increase in tax revenue, but we're not keeping up with what our expenses should be, and we're definitely not keeping up with the steep slope in taxable value. So that's just one misconception that our properties are increasing, our taxable value is increasing so much, aren't we just flush with cash? Well, this graph shows pretty clearly that we're not. So there's an increase in my property's value, increase my taxes. The claim was passing the Headley will add a tax on top of the annual tax increases from the increase in your property's value, at least 2 to 3% annually. Not sure exactly what this meant, but increases in your assessed value do not impact your taxable value. Your taxable value is capped at the time of your purchase. The only things that impact your taxable value are new construction. So if you had a porch, if you had a garage, and the CPI, the inflation. So once you sell your property uncaps, and the person who buys your home, that person then will pay taxes based on the taxable value of the property when they purchase it. However, the flip side there is under Headley and Proposal A, everyone else in the town will pay a lower tax rate because when we add more taxable value to the tax roll, the millage rate reduces. So we're not seeing any benefit there. There's some misinformation about the skate park that it costs $56,000 per year with $40,000 in wages, and for a staff skate park that brings in $4,400. That's not true. We bring in about $20,000 when you include the contributions from the townships. Little Traverse and West Traverse contribute money for that. Our costs for 2021 were $56,000. 2022, we projected it to be $50,000 and approximately $34,000 for staff wages and benefits. And those staff wages primarily come from having a presence there. So when there's kids there, there's adult presence to manage rental of skates, et cetera. The other is putting together the wooden ramps, the boards that we have. That takes a lot of time. So one reason why we're fundraising for a concrete skate park, and we've already raised $270,000 plus for that. One reason for that is it's going to reduce the amount of time and money spent putting together these skate park ramps, putting these boards, maintenance on them. So it's going to reduce the time and money spent on labor and city taxpayer money going to that. So the idea behind the concrete skate park is it'll be a better park, and it also reduce labor and maintenance expenses. So someone mentioned about we spend $62,000 per year for other functions. Yes, their 2021 expenses were $62,000 for other functions, but what are other functions? They're auditing, supplies, education, training, dues, insurance, things that don't fit neatly into other categories. So it's not just other stuff, random stuff that we're just spending money on. It's stuff that's necessary to keep the city running. How much does the city manager get paid? This was a pretty astronomical lie here. $243,000 per year cost average for the city manager. Well, in 2019 is true, the city manager costs were $295,000. That's because we had salary and benefits for the city manager. We had salary and benefits for the then assistant to the city manager. We had a retirement payout to the former city manager, and we had contractual services to recruit and hire a new city manager. Altogether, those equal about $295,000. In 2020 and 2021, we had an assistant to the city manager. So using those budget line items to determine how much the city manager gets paid is not a good comparison. 2022 line item is the most fair comparison, $166,000, which includes salary, benefits, reimbursements, dues, training, and other office stuff like that. So it's not, there's not $243,000 average per year cost for the city manager. How much does the accounting department cost the city? Well, the claim was $159,000 per year, which was up $87,000 from 5 years ago. Again, this was out of context. This claim was not a good understanding of what that budget line item is about. So the budget line item varies year to year based on our tax rebates owed. The rebates are what we owe to the city of the township of West Traverse. We owe them $1 million for the homes that are included in a 425 agreement. 425 agreement is basically like an annexation, but has a time limit. So basically when we took those homes into the city under agreement, whatever taxes that they owe to West Traverse, we continue paying West Traverse that $1 million on an annual basis. And we capture the rest of the 4.5 mils or so. So in 2018, we owed $67,000 because in the year before 2017, the bill didn't get billed out or didn't get paid until the 2018 fiscal year. So you would probably saw $0 for 2017 and $67,000 in 2018. So some payments, as mentioned, are not collected in that fiscal year. And so we collect 2 payments in 1 fiscal year. So that's why some years you'll see $65,000, $70,000, some you'll see 0, and some you'll see $35,000 to $40,000. So it's not the accounting department jumping up $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in expenses. It's just the way the bill went out for the West Traverse millage rate. How much does the city clerk position cost? Well, the claim was $150,000 for the city clerk, which is again a necessary position by city charter and state law. City clerk line item includes the city clerk's salary and benefits, which are $125,000 together, as well as post-retirement benefits for the previous city clerk. It also includes expenses for dues, training, supplies, and et cetera. Another claim that it costs $166,000 for zoning and assessing, again, state and charter required positions. We have our zoning administrator and assessor who combine into 1 position. We do not pay our zoning assessor $166,000 in salary and benefits. It's probably around half of that. And close to half the cost of those line items come from operations and services, including dues, education programs, contractual planning services, and et cetera. How much does the city pay for a housing director from Housing North? The claim was $60,000 over 3 years. It's actually $25,000 over 3 years to help address the cities and regions' housing affordability and shortage. We collaborated with area municipalities and area nonprofits for a 3-year period. Why do we rent equipment to maintain parks, trees, sidewalks, parking lots, and et cetera? So the claim again was we spend X amount of money just in rental equipment for all these line items. Well, we're renting from ourselves. The city has an equipment fund, but when we purchase equipment like a snowplow, it goes to that, we use money from the equipment fund. And then our other funds rent out that snowplow as an on-needed basis. So when we need a plow parking lot, we rent out that plow from the equipment equipment fund, and it goes applied to our general fund. When the streets rent out that plow, we charge it to the street fund. So it's not like we're renting from equipment willy-nilly from just random private companies. It's a state system, a state accounting system there for how to keep track of equipment. The state created that rate for which we rent. So it's nothing complicated. Yeah, it might not make sense to your average Joe. Is like, why are we renting from ourselves? But we have to create an equipment fund, and we have to rent it from our general funds to show the true cost of what it takes to maintain our roads and our parking lots, et cetera. Isn't the city supposed to fix the sidewalks with the voter approved 1 mil? So the claim, again, yes, voters approved 1 mil for sidewalk and road millage. The sidewalks are still messed up, quote unquote. Well, yeah, city voters did pass the 1 mil in 2017, and we are required to spend 10% of that revenue on sidewalk construction. So each year the city dedicates $25,000 to fixing and replacing sidewalks. Most of the rest of it, all the rest of that money goes to fixing and maintaining our streets. So, I mean, if we had more money from the street millage, if you want to dedicate more from streets and shift it to sidewalks, city council could do that. But, streets, we need to repair our streets and we need to repair our sidewalks. DPW has a plan. Each year they're going through the worst sections of sidewalk and hiring out to fix those sidewalks. So this year it's on State Street on the east side of State Street between Snyder and Lake. Next year it'll be something different. So I understand there's sidewalks that need repair. There's a plan for that. There's a program for that. $25,000 a year. Does the city have a full-time parks director and a parks assistant? Well, the claim was we hired a first-time ever parks director at $80,000 expense. Then we hired a part-time parks and recreation assistant at a cost of $25,000 to $35,000. The parks director, yes, it is. The parks director salary is about $55,000 annually. She also receives $13,000 in benefits such as healthcare and retirement. We do not have a part-time parks and recreation assistant. We had a part-time assistant, but we eliminated that position and changed it into a full-time position. So we eliminated part-time by transitioning to full-time position. We got rid of the assistant to the city manager position. That saved the city about $30,000 annually from where we were at before. We do have part-time park staff to help with the beach, skate park, and Kiwanis Park. Those are not new positions. We've always, at least for many years, had those positions. The city hired a police officer to serve as a school liaison officer. This claim is the city hired an additional school liaison police officer at $80,000. So because of there was a school shooting in Michigan and several other scares and shootings throughout the country, the school approached the city about creating a school liaison police officer position. For our agreement with the school, they paid 3/4 of that position when the officer is at the school. We pay 1/4 when the officer is working for us in the summertime. And we had a part-time police officer. We eliminated that part-time position so we could fund our portion of this full-time school liaison. So we didn't add to the cost of the city by hiring this police officer. I think it was only probably for equipment, probably for the vest and stuff like that. But as far as wages, it's a wash. The city paid for its employees' health care. The city waived all state mandated employee health care cost share, $30,000 plus annually. Well, first of all, there is no state mandate that this requires cities to share requires employees to share health costs with the city. Our city pays our employees monthly premiums. Employees are responsible for their deductible, their co-payments, and other payments for services and procedures not covered by insurance. The city can require employees to pay 20% of the monthly premium per contract. However, this does make Harbor Springs less competitive with surrounding municipalities, making it harder to recruit and retain quality employees. We discussed this several times at council on why we decided not to have the employees pay 20%. Many employees were on the verge of only taking 55 to 60% of their pay home with them, and less than 50 if we would have kept them their pay 20% for their premium. So we are not as competitive as we like to think with other municipalities. Other municipalities are moving their wages quickly and they're moving them up fast. A lot of the surrounding municipalities as well as downstate municipalities. We're doing what we can to keep our employees here. And that's just another part of why it's important to look at our expenses, important to look at our revenue sources, because we want to maintain employees and we want to maintain quality employees. We need to keep up with the market. And in this market, as you know, people at McDonald's are paying $15 and $20 per hour. Some of our staff are getting $22, $23 an hour. What's keeping them here is the benefits. So I think it's crucial that we maintain good benefits, but that's a policy decision council tackles every year at budget season. The solar panels on city buildings work. So the claims city spent $135,000 on ineffective solar panels. Solar panels on the fire station, skate park building, and Fort Park building are effective. In 1 year, they produced nearly 70 megawatt hours of energy, and the city has seen about $7,000 in revenue. We typically purchase our power from downstate and out-of-state energy companies. Solar panels on city buildings allow us to produce power locally, so a little more cost effectively, and allow us to prevent us from having to buy non-local power. The solar panels will last a minimum of 25 years. By minimum, I mean they're guaranteed, warranty 25 years. And they can last up to 50 years. Many solar panels that have been put up in the 70s are still working. So the solar panels have a long lifespan. In the 15 to 20 years, it'll take about 15 to 20 years to see a return on our investment. After that, if the panels last up to 50 years, we could see $250,000 in increased spending on purchasing electricity from downstate. So this was a long-term revenue idea here, was to produce power locally so we spend less money in the future on purchase downstate. Now, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference because we purchase millions of dollars of electricity each year. It's one small thing, and it's a thing that council thought would benefit the city. We're thinking long-term and not just short-term. Did the city spend money on City Hall landscaping? The claim is the city spent $24,000 on City Hall landscaping. We spent money to landscape and beautify the spillway project that was completed in 2019. Council did not include the landscaping of the spillway in 2019 because we know how the project was going to unfold, and we wanted to wait till the thing was completed before we landscaped it. So yeah, we spent some money on that landscaping to make the entrance to town by the spillway look nice. It's not City Hall landscaping, it was a spillway landscaping. And we have received a $12,000 donation for trees. Received a grant for planting other deciduous trees along the spillway, and we received in-kind tree plant design service, free design services for the thing. So something that might have cost us $70,000, $80,000 plus, we got for about $30,000. So it was a good time to capitalize on that as opposed to waiting. And we have received a lot of complaints about the entrance to town, and something the council decided to move on. Why is the city involved in so many lawsuits? So the claim is the city has incurred historic and unprecedented levels of litigation expense due to incompetence, negligent decision-making, and a flagrant disregard for rule of law. Yeah, in the past 3 years, the city has been involved in 5 lawsuits. City won 3 of those lawsuits and 2 are still pending. We won the tribal lawsuit. We won 2 Carter Williams lawsuits related to the IBS building approval. A Freudenberger lawsuit is still ongoing. That's related to the IBS building approval. And then there's Andrew Potter, assistant to the city manager, wrongful termination lawsuit. That's still pending. So none of these legal fees that we've incurred have been due to settlement or to court mandated payments. So far, they've all been just legal expenses because people decided to sue the city. More than half of them have lost so far, and the others are still pending. And we're pretty confident about the others as well. If you have any questions for us or for council about this, I mean, please talk to us anytime, whether it's today, next month, whenever. The budget is available. All the past budgets are on the website. Yes, they can be hard to read because government accounting is a little different than private accounting. there's different funds, money's allocated differently, but there's nothing hidden there, there's nothing excessive there. This presentation, and we have many more facts to show that our spending has not been reckless, our spending has been less than previous years, our spending has been, we've been spending just enough to get by with the existing services. So please take that for what it's worth.
Aggie Lacey, 315 East Third Street. I just wanted to put on record that this year, we actually asked 2 different times to put together a financial committee to review this information. So all this information is on the website. I encourage everybody to take their time, review it as you may of what it might be. Yes, it is hard to understand because they put it in different buckets, but being able to really have a team together aside from council would be beneficial. So going forward, I would recommend doing something like that. Also, I do think that values of Harbor Springs are a little bit different than the 5 cities that you have compared us to, specifically the millage information that was sent out comparing to Charlevoix, East Jordan, and so forth. Our property values are $289 million for 1,300 properties. East Jordan has property values of only $55 million. So of course, their millage is going to be a lot higher. If you look at the other towns that we are compared to, they're lower than Harbor Springs. If you look at Mackinac Island, of course, their property values are going to be a lot higher, as well as New Buffalo, which kind of is a good comparison to Harbor Springs. Very high value, not a lot of properties, but high income. I also, if you're looking at comparison to Boyne City, they have 3,000 different properties. We have 1,300 properties. So it's the values of what you want for this town to be. I believe that, you have to make your own decisions and look at the budget because it's all there for everybody to review. But I would just encourage going forward that you do have a financial committee.
Hi, my name is Jane Cobb. I live at the bottom of Jet Hill in the summers, but I walk my dogs and I'm real concerned about Main Street sidewalks, especially, and I think all of you know where the polished on Main is between that and the Methodist Church. There's a total crumbling piece of sidewalk there. And the other day someone tripped, you can see the blood still in front of the Methodist Church where she fell from that sidewalk. And I had someone look at the sidewalk and to see what it would cost to fix it. It's been like that for 2 years and possibly 3. I know you said you're fixing things up on Snyder or State, but between the local residents and the many, many visitors, this is a big hazard and would probably add to your lawsuits one of these days. So for 8 pieces of sidewalk to fix that terribly crumbled sidewalk, it's $2,240. Now, I think someone should take a look at it. I think there's another one on 3rd Street, East 3rd. There's another bad one on West 3rd. And at that price, we're talking less than probably $10,000 to fix 3 major hazards. So when you say your budget is $25,000, I think you could maybe work this in before we have any more accidents. Thank you.
Anyone else? And way in the back.
Pam Hutchins, before 65 State Street. So my question probably goes to Jeff. You said that property taxes get reassessed, go up when there's new construction. So for example, down on 2nd Street, there are 3 or 4 vacant lots that have now big houses going on them. So just off the top of my head, knowing what I do, just generally, I'm gonna guess that that was maybe $150,000, $200,000 vacant lot. That's probably got a $1.5 million to $2 million house on it now. So when does that property get reassessed? Now it's a possibly $2 million piece of land. And when does that money come to the city? How much does the city get out of that? So when does it go from vacant land assessment to new construction house being lived in assessment? And when does town get the money?
Properties are reassessed on an annual basis. The assessment always is representative of what the property looks like on tax day, which is December 31st. So the assessments and the assessment change notice that went out in the mail in February setting the assessed taxable values for the current year are based on how properties looked as of December 31st of the previous year. So if the lot was vacant on December 31st of last year, the home is under construction this year. If that home is finished for the following tax year on December 31st for next year, it will be assessed as a finished home and that value will be added to the roll. If it's a partial completion, then an approximate percentage of value estimating the partial completion will be added to the roll for a house that's, let's say, 50% complete or 75% complete.
And when does the city get the money? When does the city get the money?
So we send out our tax bills. There's a summer tax bill and a winter tax bill. And Victor, on that slide, I don't remember where it was, where we break down. I can't remember. Are we on the summer bill or the winter?
Summer, we're on the summer.
So the city collects our 5.7 mils on that summer tax bill. And so then that money would come in, I believe the bills have gone out. The deadline is coming up here, I think August 15th approximately. Does that sound right, Nick?
Yeah.
So is that money that goes in then to the city at that time? So if the house is completed on December 31st, the new value will be applied. The owner will get the tax bill in July. The city will get its money, I think it's due like right about now, middle of August. And then that amount of money, that new amount of money, what percentage of that is actually money for the city to use, like the sidewalks and whatever is necessary? When does the city get the extra amount of money?
So the way it really works, I think what you're trying to ask, Pam, is we have to look at all the properties as a whole. So the city, I don't know what time it is, sometime in the spring, Nick, when you look at the entire city's tax roll. So it gets added to the entire tax roll of the city. And then we determine what the new millage rate will be at that time of the year. So we'll see it probably sometime, we'll know that value sometime in the late spring probably, and then we'll get the money coming into us hopefully by August of that year.
And then, so if $150,000 property turns into $1.5 million property, and they're a resident, let's just call them a resident because it's easier for me to figure anyway, how much more will the city get? If a property goes from $150,000 vacant lot to $1.5 million fully built out lot completed, how much more money will the city receive then?
We don't know because it depends on a lot of other factors, other values of other homes in the city, the CPI, the uncappings, that lowers the millage rate. So this person who builds a new house, they'll probably pay several $1,000s, $10,000 in taxes. However, that will affect depending on those other factors, affect the millage rate for everyone. So we don't know if their millage rate will be 5.6 mils. We don't know if their millage rate will be 5.5 mils. We won't know that until we look at the entire taxable roll. So we won't.
But the city will receive more money for having allowed that $1.5 million house to be built?
We don't know until we look at the tax roll. We don't
So
know.
if the answer was yes, how much might the city receive? $5 or 5,000?
I'm not sure. I don't have that answer for you.
That's an answer we need to know, don't you think? Because that's where our money comes to run our town, right? So we need to know how much money comes to us on a reliable basis, right?
There's a lot of factors that come into play there, though. So yes, the city will receive a new revenue source with that new home being built, right? So that person's property taxes for that vacant lot may have been, $5,000 or $1,000 or $500 or $1,000 per year for the vacant lot. With that new home, depending on the value of that home and what the assessed and taxable value would be following the new assessment for that property is going to be increasing in revenue that's being generated to all the taxing authorities, the city, the county, the schools. However, that new taxable value that's being added to that roll and that new income is part of the Headley rollback formula, the millage reduction formula. So with that new construction, it plays a part in the formula for determining what that Headley rollback is. So even though we might, let's say, gain $5,000 as an example in property taxes, which are then split between all of the taxing authorities,
Right.
other people's property taxes, we have the consumer price index, which is 3.3% this year, right? So that increases everybody's taxable value. So someone that was paying, let's say, $2,000 in taxes last year, now they're paying $2,100 this year. With that millage reduction fraction, even, when there's new construction and uncappings and things like that play a real big part of this. When those things happen, let's say that your property taxes would have, through the normal course of time, through the consumer price index, increased by $100 for the year. The millage reduction fraction brings that down. So the community's taxing authorities might only gain an increase of $80 per year due to that increase. So yes, the revenue for the city of Harbor Springs is increasing each year. Our taxable value, I believe we showed on one of the slides, increased from last year to this year by about $15 million. So our revenue is going up a little bit, but the millage reduction fraction is rolling that back down. We're not keeping up with the rate of inflation. So when we do see a little bit more revenue, we saw our revenue stream on the blue line there is increasing a little bit from year to year. And uncappings, new construction, things like that are included in that and are part of that. But we're not keeping up with that red line, right? So when other projects, like I think it was, maybe I'm going outside of what I do for assessing, but it was 4 years ago when we originally budgeted for the boardwalk, total price for the whole thing was going to be like 400 to 500,000. Now, 5 years later, the cost of that project has increased to 600,000 to just do a portion of it. So yes, our revenue is increasing some, but project costs are increasing at a much dramatic.
So when that $1.5 million house gets built, when that lot is approved and that project is completed, the city does receive some more money.
Yes.
And the formula for how much that is complicated, and you can't really say this $1.5 million house results in an extra $2,000 for town. You can't say that.
It would take sitting down and doing some math to figure out exactly what those numbers would be. And that would take too much time at a meeting like this. But if you wanted to contact me outside of a meeting, we could do something and look at some specific numbers if you'd like.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff. Very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I think we had one hand up on Allison Larson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I would just like to state that our summer tax bills, there was a 3% increase, and no one from the city has addressed that increase that we all received due to inflation this year. And also, with inflation going gangbusters right now, how much are you projecting it will increase when our winter tax bills come due?
I believe that she's referring to the 3.3% consumer price index that's set by the state of Michigan, and that's applied to the taxable value of all properties throughout the state. We don't have any control over what that is, and that's set on the taxable value. So that same 3.3% that was added to the summer bill, people can look to their winter bills. If there were no other changes with their property, they could look at last year's winter bill and estimate that it's probably going to be 3.3% higher, and that's due to that CPI that the state puts in place. They have a website on the State Tax Commission that you can go and you can look at the historic percent changes each year. That's guaranteed to never be more than 5%. I think the highest we've had is 3.5 or 3.6%. I don't know what it's going to be for next year.
And Allison, that was addressed on the slide that you see on the screen right now.
Wait a minute.
John Wayman. I'm John Wayman. I live on East Third. Reason why we're here is to receive information from the City Council in connection with the millage or the Headley override that's coming up soon. All of those folks that have been elected own property in the city. They pay taxes in the city. This is a very complicated process. I'm sure they're no more interested in paying more taxes than we are. I would encourage all of you to pay attention to our elected representatives in connection with their recommendation on whether or not we should vote yes for the Headley override. There's one thing that stands out in my mind that's an embarrassment. You know, we're talking about the sidewalks that we're not really taking care of in certain areas of the city, and it's going to cost $10,000 here to fix and so on, and we're not getting to it. There's another symptom, and it's the boardwalk. I mean, this city is asking for donations to replace a city sidewalk. I think that's an embarrassment to the city, and I think we owe our elected representatives a vote yes on the Headley overlay.
Anyone else? Somebody's on her hand.
All right, we will move on. Item 3C.
Victor, I want to say thanks for doing that,
Yeah.
because I think, I obviously have read it ahead. I think it's an excellent overview of where the city stands on some of that.
All right, electric substation location review. In June, staff presented 3 possible public parcels within the city limits that may have been suitable for our electric substation. Those parcels were all wooded lots. 2 of them were not feasible or practical from a financial or physical point of view. The chosen parcel on Lake Street, and it borders Little Traverse Township properties. Before we enter into contract with our electrical engineer company represented by Michael McGeehan from GRP Engineering, who will be here to answer any questions from the public or from council, we should ensure that this location is the best parcel for the community. I know there's been concern from residents that live near there and other residents as well. And so before we spend serious money in design costs, on final design costs for that location, what we have seen circulating right now are just conceptual plans. So there's a lot of criticisms of those plans. Well, yes, they're conceptual. We didn't spend the tens of thousands of dollars on final plans yet. That was the next step. So before we get to that stage, before we enter that contract, I want to make sure the council is okay with that location. If they're not, to consider other locations. We did not consider parkland in the city. We did not consider open space parkland because it's already parkland. If that's a route council wants to go down, council can, but staff didn't do that because we looked at our vacant lots. One was just east of the deer park, which was too wet. And we don't even know if we would get state permission to do it there. The other one was on Hoyt Road and Pete's Run subdivision. And that was also had some complications with the land itself there. So the best choice we had was Lake Street. But again, we didn't look at parks. So factors that impact costs of neighboring properties. Whatever council decides to do, whether it's stick with this lot or explore other options, these are what we need to be considering. Proximity to the center of our electric load. So a few decades ago, we moved our electric substation from this area out east toward Conway Road for 2 reasons. One was aesthetics. The second, more important reason was we assumed that the load was going to grow that way. The growth. There was going to be tremendous growth east. Well, that growth never happened. The growth actually happened more toward the center and even toward the west. So we got rid of a substation that was in the center of our grid, put on the far eastern edge, and that's reducing liability to the center and the west. So we really need to consider it. It needs to be in the center, particularly somewhere in city limits, if possible. Needs to be close to our primary lines. I mean, the further away it is from our lines, that just increases the cost tremendously to connect the substation to those lines. That's just a fact. Nearby development, you want to consider, is it residential, commercial, community? That plays a factor. The more near residential, the more screening. You need to do more mitigation efforts. So that's something to consider. Characteristics of the parcel. You want to look at the topography, the shape of the parcel, potential access for a driveway for vehicles, trees, vegetation. What needs to change on that parcel, and what obstacles does that parcel present? Current uses and benefits of those properties. Screening, again, what type, fence, vegetation. Traverse City has a substation downtown, center of its town, downtown. You wouldn't even know it's there because it's in a brick building with a coffee shop in front. So there's ways to put these in places without knowing that they're there. And finally, as I mentioned, indoor versus outdoor substation. Again, in my mind, I had the idea that we were set to proceed with final plans for that parcel, but there's been some questions and concerns from community members that live there. So I think, council should explore if there's other options in their mind. Otherwise, that is our best vacant lot that we have. most feasible one.
Well, we discussed this earlier, and this was the cheapest, most viable option of the ones that you presented. Am I correct in that statement?
Yes.
And I think we all agreed at that time it was the place to do it. I know we had a lot of people here that talked to us about it. Just maybe after public comment, if we want to backtrack, we can. I'm happy with what we have.
Were you able to do a 3D? Did Dan ask you to do a 3D conceptual of this?
We have not gone to that expense, as Victor stated, to do a full 3D rendering of what the substation would look like. We have done that type of rendering with graphic artists in the past, but to date, we have not done that. Just the 2D top down and elevation views.
And I will say there's a video circulating on Facebook that shows this monstrous substation that what this would look like. It's one transformer. It looks like this, what you see on the screen. It's not 300 feet wide. It's not that wide. So
As I remember, the footprint for this is roughly 100 by 70.
yeah,
Yes.
Something like that.
there was a misrepresentation of what the substation would actually look like. This was showed earlier. This was in city council plans. This was a tree board plans. This has been gone to council at least twice. So and I shared it with residents who have asked for it.
Okay. Public comment time. Yeah, hands in the back.
I have a question. Your other,
We'll get your name and.
I'm Jane Ryan.
And your answer.
So my question for this is people are gonna be pulling into Harbor and they're gonna see this, correct?
Chances are no.
Okay, chances are when they're pulling out of Harbor, is that gonna be the last memory of what they see of Harbor Springs?
No.
And have you thought about like Zone Park up in that area, or like what about on State Street, like where all those storage units are? Why couldn't we put it in there instead of right on our main street? And over there is also over there, they have the kids have their baseball diamonds over there. There's the track field over there. There's a lot of things as far as the kids that are gonna be close to there. And if you have a large fence and then you have barbed wire, and I mean, I just think it's tacky, to put it bluntly. And I think there would be a better location for that. That's it.
I'm Bill Dome, I'm the supervisor from Traverse Township. Fortunately, I'm a good neighbor to the east. I'm here because we went through this process once before on that same location. It was proposed, I can't tell you how many years ago, to do that. We decided not to at the time, I don't know why. But I'd just like to remind the city that my whole life effort has been a series of cooperation between municipalities, not only Harbor Springs, the city of Petoskey, and all the surrounding townships. I remember back when I first started in this business a lot of years ago, we coined the M119 corridor from Pleasant View Road to the city of Harbor Springs, the gateway to Harbor Springs. And the goal was to protect the integrity of that corridor so that it very little change would take place over the years to protect the aesthetics of the resort community and the quality of the city of Harbor Springs. We didn't do that for some of the rest of our township. The corridor on 31 through Conway to Olden was not part of that, but the city was precious to us. I spent most of my life making sure that the Harbor Springs Airport property was retained in public trust, because that's the last view of the bay from that corridor all the way to the city. The last view of the bay, precious view of the bay. Tremendous value to the city, tremendous value to us. And I think we've done a marvelous job on that. And I give credit to John Fisher, the late John Fisher, and Dave Irish that put that thought in my mind that we protect that corridor. And I challenge anybody to dispute that we've done a good job on that. There's two businesses that are located there. One is the Schiller Funeral Home, or the former Schiller Funeral Home, which has not changed in its appearance since it was built as a house. And it had very quiet setting, you might say. Very good neighbor. The other one is the, can't think of the lady's name, but her husband's name is Hoffman. The art gallery, that changed to a lesser use because it was back in those days, it was a hair salon operation with a lot of traffic. And I thought the work that this lady does fits the community, and I allowed it as a lesser non-conforming use. That's the only businesses you'll see along that road. Quite frankly, I'd like to see another McDonald's. I'd like to see another Taco Bell, KFC, so I can get in line and get my food quicker, closer to home. But we're there to protect that gateway. The subject property is a gateway to my only residence on the north boundary of the city. And I think they deserve the same protection that we've offered to the city for that gateway as they do for their fine residence back there. That piece of property is, it's true. You could screen an industrial, this is an industrial operation. And you could screen it, make it kind of somewhat complementary, but nothing like the pristine piece of property that it is today. People come into the city on that bike trail. We cooperated with that bike trail with the city and other municipalities to make it work, the harboring. And it's a real asset for the city. Those trees are precious, as the city found out when the school inadvertently cut some of them down. I don't know what the city put a value on those trees, but at that time it was valuable to you. And it's valuable to those people that live on that north side, and it's valuable to the gateway to Lake Street, the whole Lake Street. I just simply ask the city to give the same consideration to those folks on that corridor as we have given to the city in protecting that gateway from Pleasant View Road into the city. And I gotta tell you, people, you're not in this business like I am, like Vic is, but every piece of property is under attack today. And if we start chipping away at what we have in our precious aesthetic values of our property, every day I get inquiries about a piece of property somewhere on that corridor that can we put this there? Can we put that there? And we're saying no. And we're in our process of revamping our master plan, and we're going to continue to consider the city gateway as we would expect the city to continue protecting the gateway to our residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Relatively new to the area, but
Can we get your name and address,
my
please?
name is Henry Hoffman, and I live on East Lake Road as a seasonal resident. But unfortunately, I'm getting involved in this relatively late in the game, but I have some comments and I think I have some background that'll be helpful. It'll be 2 minutes and I'll put this together very concisely. Good afternoon. My name is Henry Hoffman. I'm a seasonal resident of Harbor. They're the proposed location of the high-voltage substation. My concern with the location, like other residents in the area, deal with tree removal, constant humming noise, and the health effects of electromagnetic waves. To make best use of my time, though, I want to briefly share some of my work history, which is applicable to this situation. I'm a registered engineer in the state of Michigan, semi-retired after 48 years in the electrical generating business. Big Rock brought me to northern Michigan in 1988. Most of my career was with Consumers Power, now I'm on CMS Energy. However, from 07 to 2010, I worked for Wolverine Power as a project engineer for building a large generating plant in Rogers City. The engineering work included determining locations for high voltage substations. Very helpful to the process was using industry standards to minimize cost and controversy while maximizing reliability. With that background, two things stand out as wrong about the proposed location of the new Howard Springs substation. First and foremost, Room 1 in these standards that Wolverine had put together with the people in Boyne City as well, being part of Wolverine, minimize impact to local residents. To do that, if a substation must be located in a city, always located in the industrial zone of the city, not in the residential area. We do have an industrial area here that could be used. I'm not sure how much looking was done. Again, I'm a little too new. I'm sorry about that. But if for some reason the industrial area flat out is not available, then I think it's necessary to locate as near as possible to the city, but in a township location that does not affect any residents. Bottom line, we applied these rules and standards, and you can cite a substation, believe it or not, and without angering any residents. And you really have a bunch of angry residents right now. The second thing wrong with the proposed location, it should be large enough to accommodate future growth. This is not the case if you shoehorn into a relatively small triangular area between Lake Street and East Lake Road. The old saying is penny wise, pound foolish. The Harbor Springs area is going to continue to grow. I think we know that for certain. We need city council decisions that are preparing for future growth. And I know there are electrical people that feel that you won't have to go bigger for a long time. But the problem is you're dealing with a crystal ball. I mean, my crystal ball is different than yours and different than the next guy. And it's really, that's a risky thing to say in this day and age when we're looking at the growth this area we're going under. And it's saying you really need to bigger size substation than that with room for future growth if you're going to do the right thing now. That's all I'm saying. I'm willing to help. I'm doing a willing to help. That helps.
What else?
I'm Susan Reynolds, I live at 4556 Highland Road. It's really sad what's happening in the area. I mean, it's really getting developed. My husband and I just bought 14 acres to protect it for no other reason from developers who were after it. And it's happening all over. I don't know the rules. I don't know, can't the substation be put, does it have to be within the city limits? Can it not be put in the industrial park?
We'll
There's
take
a
them.
whole bunch of things.
Let's answer all those questions after we get public comment.
I mean, I know there's a piece of 2-acre plot that's just on the edge of the industrial park. I know it's zoned for housing, but nobody's gonna build a house on that lot. It's above the gas station. And I mean, if it's a money thing, this town is all about conservancy, about raising money for things that maybe you all don't have the funds for. We have a lot of people of means. We have a lot of people that care. And the Land Conservancy is an example of it. And Dave Irish would be rolling over in his grave right now to have this going on. It's just, I don't think there's anybody in town that wants this station there. I called everybody I could reach out to. First of all, they didn't even know about it. I found one person that knew about it. And second of all, no, they were shocked. They were just shocked. They just didn't expect it. So why do something that is this adversely received by all the people in the community? And it will damage Harbor Springs. It's a resort. I mean, if you don't want it to be a resort, that's, you know, it is, it's a resort. And some of us are here more than others, but, you know, I've had a home for 45 years up here. And there's been lots of changes, but the one thing that I love about Harbor Springs, you can come back after 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and it's all still recognizable. And that took a lot of people to keep it that way. Dave Irish was one of them, the Land Conservancy, you know, and all the people that started it, it's another. And we care in a way about this community that a lot of towns don't. And I'm sure there's another way. And if it's the money that's the problem, then ask the people to contribute.
Kathy Breitner, you've all received my letter on this topic. 2 of you were kind enough to respond. Thank you. One of the top of the things in my mind on that location are the trees. This is an era where we don't cut trees, not only in this spot where you argued about wrongful removal of trees, but anywhere in a global warming setting should we be removing trees. Because I totally agree that the footprint is not huge, but the amount of trees that have to be removed and that you don't have in front of you to make this decision, we don't yet know. If all the 80-foot trees have to come out to make sure that none of them fall upon this facility, the bulk of the trees will be gone. There will be screening, yes, but from the parking lot side of the soccer field, there will be no trees. From the the bike path on this side, that small strip between the corner of the facility, there can't be any trees because it would hit the facility. We also don't know yet, nor do you know yet, about lighting at the facility. Are we going to be, as neighbors, having these lights lit all the time? Or can you possibly work with your designers to make sure we have low impact lighting, lighting that's going down only, maybe only motion lit, so we're not looking at that. One of the things that was mentioned by a city official in the Harbor Light recently is we don't like what's going on, go to the voting stations and vote. We cannot. You're affecting the township people who have no say in what you do. A lot of us in that area have given an awful lot of time to make sure that the city is good. This is not good for our residents, probably for the city. And with so many unanswered questions in front of you, please be very careful in making this decision.
Good evening. My name is Jim Ozenberger, and actually live just outside of town on Collins Lane off State Road. But I am a customer of the city's power, and I do have my mom lives at Bay Bluffs. So given that, I guess with the amount of interest in this and emotion that's tied up in this right now, I would suggest that you give a longer planning period. Consider more options. I would recommend also considering a no action alternative. Look outside the box and consider maybe somehow using less energy. You know, that's off the power grid. Consider those kind of options, and I'd also like to see a stronger purpose and need for why this is needed. That's it.
I'm going to read off here. My name is Bill Riesenbeck. I live up on East Lake Road. Since I became aware of the council's plan, I've had conversations with several residents. Not one single person I have had conversations with thinks this is a good idea. Most of these people were totally unaware of the city's plan to mess up with this green space. It seems an opposite to what the city would want, like take care of their grass, trees, preserve the remaining wooded areas in Harbor Springs. I believe that's part of the master plan's stated goal. No one I have spoken to thinks this is a good idea. There's no reason to put it here. I cannot find anyone who can tell me, well, why I could reasonably put it here or why it would make sense. I believe there are better locations. From what I understand about reading the power report from the city could possibly, there's several other options. There is better solutions than to supply the city with extra power needed just during July and August. Then to just permanently put this thing in here. It says that the peak power demand is in July and August, and the shoulder months, which are June and September, are half the peak power demand. I realize there's a power station out on Clayton Road, and I was wondering if it needs an upgrade within 5 or 6 years. One of the transformers is going to have to be replaced. Would it be possible at that time to fix and upgrade that station so that you wouldn't have to build another power station? If not, would it be some way that you could talk to maybe Bill Doan here and find a place outside of town? Does it have to be in the city? I believe there's lots of alternatives, and I think you should just rethink this plan and find another place. This is a wonderful little spot. We could put a park in there. You could do all sorts of great things with it, but putting a transformer in there, turning it into an industrial station is ridiculous. Thank you.
Well, you already
It's me
talked.
again. I'm Jane, right?
You already talked. You only get one shot.
Okay.
Next. Sorry about that.
My name is Lenny Furchy. I live on East Lake Road. I have written a letter which you've received, and I don't want us to take the time to read all of it because you may already have read it. I talked about the trees in there, which I'm very concerned about that piece of property being denuded of the foliage that's there. I think it's easy to think of the screening at this time of year when everything's so thick and green. When the leaves fall off the trees, you see everything through there. And I was here when the tree board discussed screening options, and it didn't sound like there was any really good alternative. And some of those alternatives cost the city money and will in perpetuity. The trees will continue to grow, the bushes, and they have to be cut back a certain amount or trimmed so that you don't have trees growing so tall that they fall on the substation, which is the original problem. I want to skip some paragraphs, so just give me a minute. I don't think screening will affect the noise pollution or the light pollution. Kathy mentioned downlighting or motion sensor lighting, which I think is a good idea. If there had to be lighting, I think as it stands right now, and last night, there's supposed to be some double meteor shower right now going on in the sky. It might sound silly to talk about it, but actually that parking lot of the soccer field and that dark triangle, which sort of shelters that space from other people and other, buildings, is very dark. And you can go out there and see the northern lights, Milky Way, the meteor showers, eclipses, and it's fun. And I think that's really an advantage to Harbor Springs. And I think it really could be an advantage to the schools if they chose to use it that way. Now, last time I was here, I have some concerns, and I've heard this in the public, as Bill said, I'm walking around downtown last Thursday. I didn't find anyone who didn't want to talk about this and say, oh, that's terrible. There was one person that was concerned about the power lines and how much it was going to cost to thread them, to a different place. But the majority of the people I talked to as well did not want this. They thought it was inappropriate. So some of the concerns that they voiced were that they didn't like having an electromagnetic field so close to the athletic fields. Now, I did read about that, and I have to say that I read that the substation is likely to be safe. and that there's no indications that exposure to EMF would necessarily be a factor. But I also read that continued exposure to the EMF has been looked at as a factor in childhood leukemia. Now, it was inconclusive, but inconclusive doesn't mean no either, doesn't mean no effect. So I think that there's some fear about, having a lightning rod there and students running off, a wet soccer field or baseball fields to their cars toward the substation. It just doesn't make sense to me. And at the last meeting I was here, Victor said to me basically, well, try to come up with some alternatives. Well, I'm not really equipped to do that. I'm not a professional power person. I did walk all the spaces. I could see that there might be room at the deer park, but that wouldn't be a first choice in my opinion. And though if you do, and people really need to have the deer park, put the deer park where the deer are, which is there. And, then maybe the substation down here. And the other thing I wondered about was if there's some space where there's electric power equipment stored in Franklin Park, up there sort of by the bus garage. I don't know if that would be enough room, but could you, store the equipment somewhere else and use that property? Another thing I thought of was, is there a way for either the school district or the township to trade land? I thought maybe you'd have to buy something and nobody wants you to have to spend the money to do that, but it's to trade property that is adjacent to the township, it's adjacent to the school property. And it seems to me there would be much better use for the whole community, not just us, but everybody, to find a location a little bit outside the city. It needs to be further west, fine. But, in addition to looking at possible other sources like solar panels, which were mentioned earlier in this meeting, I just think that there's a lot.
Can you wrap it up?
Yes, I will. I'm pretty passionate about this myself, but I think that you've heard it, and thank you very much for your.
Well,
Someone on Zoom.
there you go.
Miranda Miller.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, hi, Miranda Miller at 651 Second Street. A lot of the questions that I had were actually answered by another question I have is that regarding this being put in the city limits, is this an absolute priority that it has to be right downtown in the town for some reason in Harbor Springs? I don't know of one community anywhere in our state or anywhere that they would put an atrocity like this and a safety issue right in the middle of a beautiful neighborhood or, a sports area. That's one of my, I feel that there is more education on why this has to be brought right into the center of the city. I think that the citizens would probably like to know more about this. And this may sound rather simple, but it appears to be a contradiction. If you listen to previous city council meetings, you hear a lot about the dark houses, how there aren't enough people. We need to bring more people into the city, the VRBO homes, that they sit dark and they sit empty. Well, wouldn't that kind of contradict that we're not using that much power? Maybe 9 months out of the year that we have some spike times. And again, the lighting would have been a concern to me too. No neighbor wants to sit and look at that thing glowing all night long. Anyway, those are some questions that I think that need to be looked at. There's got to be another alternative outside of the city. And like I said, secondly, it contradicts the dark house theory that we're not using that much energy.
Thank you.
Fred Simons, I live on Arbor Street. I don't know how many of you have walked that triangle in the spring, but it's nothing but white in there because it's the largest group of trilliums you'll ever find. Okay, and we almost lost the opportunity for the core station there. A few years back, they wanted to put a district library in.
Anyone else?
Lorraine Wade, I live right by where you're gonna be putting it, and I'm just, don't have a lot of facts, but I live there, and I can't imagine driving down 119, turning on Lake Street and seeing an industrial. This is a residential, we all live there, and it's just gonna be an eyesore, it's gonna grow, we all know things grow. And it's also a possible health hazard, and we know that the big trees have to come down, and so I'm just totally against it, and I'm asking you, I'm pleading with you not to do that, and to find another place. And,
I'm Karen Shrub Donnelly, 644 Ann Street. I'm the chair of the Tree Advisory Board, and as a member of the board and other members have been approached about this subject. And we, as a board, don't have any say over location, of course, of a substation. But our goal is to protect the trees, the tree canopy in the city of Harbor Springs. And so what I only would urge is that whatever location gets chosen, that one of the priorities in one of the objectives in the selection of that location would be to disrupt the fewest number of trees possible. Obviously, the passion here with the people who live in the area is to protect the trees. So I just wanted to add that. I know it's not up to us as a tree board to pick a location, but the trees around it are obviously important to the people that live close by here. Thanks.
Hi, Dan Mulder, 7th Street, and I'm the chair of the Parks Board, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Parks Board, just as a citizen. It just seems wrong-minded though to put something like this in the middle of a sports complex where on all sides almost it's places for kids and sports. And I would encourage you to take some time and think,
Else? Okay.
I think you might have someone on Zoom trying to speak.
Allison?
It's been up for a while.
I think first we should,
Sorry, that was from earlier when you had called upon me.
Yeah, I figured. Thanks, Allison. Michael, I don't know if you want to address any of that, but from the concerns that you've heard. But as far as one that I heard is other locations using Franklin Park, and why does it have to be the center of the road? I think that's important to explain why it needs to be in the city or near the city center.
Absolutely, I'll do my best to do that. And it goes back to the electric study that we did in the presentation and the reasons why this is needed. For an electric distribution substation, you need two things. You need a transmission line brought in, and then you generally locate your substation at the center of your load, because the distribution circuits that are built out of it are very costly. And so you need to find a location that takes into that electrical part of it, as well as all the items that are being discussed, to find the best place that fits into it as far as aesthetics and into the community. But from the engineering side, the location here near the center of the load, and the center of Harbor Springs is where the city grew from and the area grew from.
And that's where the substation was originally located. And that was the correct place. The transmission line that will serve the substation still exists coming around and ends right at Lake just east of Hoyt Street. So the transmission line is already at the center of the load because it used to feed the substation.
I'm sorry, it used to feed the substation that was down.
That was right down here, effectively where we are today. And with that, the distribution circuits, and it's no different in your home where you have a panel in your home serving a number of circuits to the home to break it up. That's how an electrical substation is done as well, where you have multiple circuits that are going to feed out and then have redundancy in them as they tie together. If a substation is located too far from the load or even too far from the very end of the load, it becomes very difficult to reliably serve for a couple of reasons. One, it is difficult to have redundancy in the circuits. So if one is out for some reason, maintenance, accident, whatever may occur, and also due to losses. The further you move your substation away, as you move those electrons down the conductors, down the circuits, it's very, very lossy. So you're effectively just, running the heat with the window open in the middle of winter, so to speak. So when a substation is miles and miles and miles away from the center of its load or to the end of its load, it becomes very lossy. We lose voltage and it does not become very cost effective to meet the reliability standards, to meet the ANSI standards for voltage. So when we made that presentation and looked at all of the electrical system here, looked at the standards, looked at your reliability, and looked at the placement of the substation on the very eastern side of town, there's a number of those factors that we can't meet it. And again, just talking about the need as I come back to the location. Throughout the year, even into the winter months, if we lose one of those substation transformers you have today, you're going to have outages. And we presented that to you in the study. And nobody wants to have outages. Nobody wants to be without power. So the solution to all of the items that were presented in that report was to put the substation where it belongs, which is at the center of the load. So a parcel that is close to where we sit today, which is the center of your load, as you serve all the way out to the western end, all the way to Birchwood. As a person spoke here, I'm way out on the western end, nearly 9 miles from the substation. This is the area. So a parcel that is close to the site, that's what we've looked at with you. There are not many open locations right here where all of the circuits feed out. If we choose a site that's another mile away, then a transmission line has to be built. A corridor has to be built for that transmission line. And then all the distribution circuits, and in this case, it's 4 circuits for significant redundancy, reliability, and a lot of growth that can be built out with those circuits. Again, if we move it a mile from downtown, center of load, forgive me for saying downtown, load center, we've got to build all those circuits for all that distance. And then can be quarter million a mile a circuit, and it can become cost ineffective to choose a site that is away from that load center.
If I may, I mean, some of the comments have been very clear, but someone brought up the issue of growth over time. That was factored into your study, if I remember.
Absolutely, yes.
So the station as proposed would carry the city, and again, crystal balling it, would carry us how far?
Well, the crystal balls are very fuzzy. And right now, one of the biggest crystal balls in our industry and in this country is electrification. Right now, we as a country are making decisions to electrify good portions of our lives. EVs, electrical vehicles. Yeah. A massive push, and that is coming from both governmental agencies, and it's coming up grassroots that this is a good thing. If we don't have the capacity to be able to serve that, to be able to charge EVs as they come in a very large growth, you can't serve that anymore. So yes, this substation is designed with significant growth capacity.
And should demand exceed projected growth for the substation, then to grow the capacity would be to add on to that substation.
Not necessarily, it could be just to change the transformer. So that
Within the same physical footprint.
Yes.
Change the transformer.
Yes. There was I'm going to try to answer some of the questions, and Victor, if there's some that you've written down that you'd like me to address. One, I heard lighting. We were not asked in the conceptual plan to address what the lighting would be in this station. And operationally, that is a decision that's for the city. Typically, a substation of this nature will only turn the lights on during a time when somebody needs to be in the station during dark hours. Usually a substation of this will have one downlight at the entrance or on the side of a building. Now, this station will not even have a building. So lighting is again, something that we weren't asked to give our opinion on, but when we do a design for this, those lights are only turned on when needed. And it's very rare to enter a station at night for it's just rare.
Can I ask you a question?
Mayor, it's up. Mayor.
Let's wait a minute, okay? We've got a lot of other questions queued up.
Yeah. I heard sound, and as I have in one of my presentations, and as we do substation projects around the state, the transformers have a requirement as far as the number of decibels that they can put out under a maximum condition. And really the loudest part of the substation transformer is actually when the fans are turned on during very, very high load or warm conditions. Actually, they'll have a couple fans to move the air on them. The number of decibels is about 71 decibels at about 21 feet. And when you do the comparison on that you look at the charts and it's like listening to a vacuum cleaner from that distance. So if somebody's vacuuming on the other side of the room, the substation, other than that, produces no noise. Victor, were there other?
The questions were other locations. Someone mentioned Franklin Park, obviously, and we talked about the hurdle of located further out of, that means increasing the amount of transmission line, which increases the costs. And so that's something, of course, that's a policy decision, right? How much money do we want to spend? I think one thing we're finding out quickly is money's not being handed out to the city for public projects. I mean, with the boardwalk, we're at $130,000. We have a lot of other things going on. So I know some people say that, yes, we can just raise the money, but the money's not coming. So I don't think that's reliable. I don't think council should be relying on donations to do this project. So we have to be fiscally responsible and not spend excessively, right? Because that is what our job is here, is to do the project right, but also within budget. But I think another issue that I think we talked about was any of the safety concerns about, living near a substation, because wherever it's located in the city limits, there will be residences. There's residences here on Pennsylvania Ave and Zoll Street and on Main Street. There's residents on Hoyt Street by Pete's Run. There's residents on Lake Street. Wherever we put it in the city limits, there will be residents. So maybe if you can address, Michael, the safety or concerns or danger concerns about leukemia, I heard, or something like that.
It can be a very, very long, very difficult topic. You can go to the World Health Organization, who's done a number of studies on it, and the end result of all of those studies is in conclusion, we all live with electricity in our homes, in our businesses. We put our residents, our staff up next to those lines every day. Men and women work in substations, generating plants. They work on lines. low voltage, medium voltage, which this is a medium voltage, they work on high voltage. We put them up in helicopters and hang them from lines. And those individuals, all of us, we're not suffering from that. So electricity is safe. If I ask the electric crew and Dan is here tonight, if I ask him and his staff, being the consultant, to do a project and put them up in an energized space, it's risky, but they do it, and they do it very safe every day. An electric substation that they go out and operate, they do it safely whenever they need to go out there. So electricity is safe.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but one of the specific concerns was what impact does electromagnetic radiation have on developing children? And I don't think we can ignore that. Even if it's inconclusive, that concern, given the location that we're talking about, can't be ignored.
And I am not a medical expert, and I am not going to pretend to be a medical expert.
So the council, if you have further questions or further ideas about locations, again, we look at our wooded lots. We now look at parklands. So.
Now, the original substation was actually right in this area right here.
Like we're sitting on.
So locating the power station to the south of what is today the Deer Park, would that be an acceptable location?
Yeah.
It would be an acceptable location.
I think when it was. But when we originally talked about it, Al, I think in particular was.
I was on the council when we pulled it out of here.
Right.
And it was just butt up. And the community did not want it. They wanted it moved.
How long ago was that pulled out?
40 years.
I think the substation.
1992.
Yeah.
1992.
So the profile of the substation then and the profile today, which we've seen in drawings, is quite different.
And it again, it's the screening, it's the methodology, and something that we've talked about, and it was shared that, and I've shared it here multiple times, that you go to downtown Traverse City, and I pick on that project partially because I was heavily involved in taking a coal generating plant and substation off the bay in Traverse City, and we put it into a building that, as you said, you walk by today, it's a coffee shop.
I went looking for it, and it's amazing. And
So the differences we have in Harbor Springs is as you come down the hill, you're way above it. So you look right down into it.
So
that's what you saw. That was the entrance to Harbor Springs 40 years ago. Was you look down into the substation and this nasty, messy thing we had here, and welcome to Harbor Springs. And now go downtown. Well, that's what we have.
And if that's the result of putting it down here today, then we would have to consider that. But I've walked the triangle parcel, I've been up to Hoyt Street, I've looked at all the different alternatives. And I've sat out here thinking about what it would look like with proper screening, and I look every time I drive in. I'm not sure you'd see it.
What would the added cost? I know there'd be added costs, but to put it in a building.
To put it fully in a building with a roof would be multiple millions of dollars.
Okay.
And the reason is when you fully put a substation into a building with your fully roofed, the insulation that has to be done is completely different as opposed to being insulated by air. But to put it in a building with still potentially an open roof is not millions of dollars. But then one has to fully address the concerns that are being voiced.
An option of looking at a way to screen it more effectively possibly than with trees.
So the trees, it would depend on what type of tree. I mean, a deciduous tree has a completely different profile in the winter than it does in the summer. Evergreen.
Well, and was it right here? I can't remember. Was it back further? Okay.
Because the police the barn, the horse barn was there,
Right,
and this was the waterworks right
Right.
here.
right.
And it was
It was
out
that
there
direction.
somewhere.
We had our switchgear though was all right here in the open too.
Can I ask something?
That was a lot of the switchgear that we had.
Can I ask a question? No?
Not right now.
Okay, just
We'll go back
in
to you
regards
guys.
to this.
The advantage for down here would be we wouldn't have to take a bunch of trees out. I mean, we've got more open space, but we would be using some of our park land. So, I mean, that would be something we would need to consider.
Again, it would have to be staked out to
Yeah.
really appreciate what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know, as far as the marshland in the back, how far you can go before you hit wet. So it might actually be able to be a little bit farther back than where the deer park is. I mean, these are unknowns. And if the deer park needed to shrink a little bit to keep it away from the parking area in the back, very appreciated. And you're not near any residents.
Down here?
Yeah.
You are-
What about Weekwood?
You are near.
You are near a bunch
How
of
far,
them.
how far away, if you put it to the south of the deer park, how far are you from the next house?
There's a lot of people talking.
There's one on down, there's one down on Pennsylvania.
Keep it quiet out there, please.
I don't see the difference of, if we're talking about moving it somewhere, Kiwanis Park, Franklin Park, that's about the same distance as back here to Weekwood, to the houses on Beach Drive.
But this location is actually, if I understand correctly, is in the right location for the current distribution service.
This area here
That's
is.
the cost. However many.
Well, you're talking about a different thing now. We were talking
Well, I'm talking
about.
about the project in general.
Go ahead.
And what other sites did you look at when you did this?
The three sites that Victor has spoken on. And
Down here.
it's always best to work on facts, and then from, when questions are asked, how much more will it cost to extend the transmission line? This is such an important topic that I would recommend some additional investment into being able to ensure you're making that right decision. What will it cost to go here or to there? And what are those implications? And put those facts out, maybe similar to what the city manager did for this other issue that you had come up. That may be a good step for the council.
I think we need to do that.
I think it would make sense to look at a site in this area. I don't know exactly where, because I don't know where we could do it. But I think we also should explore a little more of this site, how many trees actually would have to come down, because that's a concern of mine. So I think that's a piece of information maybe we could get a hold of, and that would help people to see whether we tagged them or whatever we did, so that people would visually see that and do some cost comparison between in an area down here and the one we're considering. Because I think those two, listening to what everybody said here and what he said too about the cost, those two make the most sense to me. So I understand Franklin Park site, I know what piece of property you're talking about, but then we're quite a ways from the center. And we are trying to be fiscally responsible, so that's a part of it that we have to look at, I think. I mean, I think that's part of our responsibility. That would be my recommendation.
Open it back up to the floor.
I just think we should table it, look at a couple other options and do it again in 2 weeks. I should put it on, let's give us next meeting to talk about it. And then we get some information back to him for some options. And then we can review it first of next month.
So we kind of already know our three choices.
Right, I've got a couple others, but we gotta discuss it. So. Table this for now. We don't need to get beat up anymore. I think we're good with where we're at. So
Make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we table this for now for further discussion.
I'll say representative. Representative.
Motion in a second now. John Leo.
Yes.
John Cox. Matt Rivera.
Yes.
Nancy Rondell. And Al Dyke.
Yes.
Motion carried.
We've got homework to do.
Yep.
Says back here.
We're done talking about this one. Send us an email, please.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Still meeting.
That's all they said. That's what they said. So we're gonna come back in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's gonna be the same.
No, no,
We're not done for reading.
yeah, it's not a change.
Everyone, the meeting is not done, so if you're gonna talk, go on the hallway,
Stay. Want to leave, please leave. Do it orderly and quiet. Chatterbox in the back. Hey, bacon. Julie. Out. I'll close the door. Thank you. All right. Voting and planning.
People getting excited outside, they still have like 3 agenda. Sorry.
All right, item 3D, zoning and planning fees, establishing an escrow policy. So we've always had a flat fee for zoning and planning fees. And while it works well, it's easy to administer, it's not always fair. And for example, let's say you have an application fee for a site plan review that's $1,000, but it only costs the city $500 to review that, approve that application. Well, that applicant is really out of $500 because it didn't cost us $1,000 to review the application. On the flip side, so in that sense, the applicant overpaid. On the flip side, let's say the application costs $1,000, but we spent $3,000 worth of planning and staff time and meetings, et cetera. That means the taxpayers or other applicants have paid for that review of that application. So an escrow policy basically says, all right, an individual is going to come to the planning commission for some sort of project review. We'll put a certain amount of money down in an escrow account that the city will have, and the city will draw money from that account to pay for that review. And if there's money left over after end of review, that money gets sent back to that individual. If that account is running low on money, well, then we ask the individual to put more money in the account. That way they are paying for what they get and they're getting what they're paying for. And we're not shifting the cost of planning reviews to the taxpayer or to other applicants. So it's a more fair way system of reviewing planning commission applications. And I reviewed this with City Clerk Nick and Zoning Administrator Jeff Grimm here. And actually this policy was taken from a policy in West Traverse Township that our new planning consultant from Beck and Rader works with. And it's worked well so far in other communities as well. So I think it's a good way to potentially save some taxpayer money and shifting the burden of plan review to the appropriate entity, which is the applicant. So I've attached the new revised fee schedule and the escrow policy, what it would look like. Again, this is for planning commission submissions. It's not for zoning permits that you would just need to see the zoning administrator for. So if council is supportive of this, I'd recommend discussion and then approval.
Sounds reasonable to me.
It's a great deal for the taxpayer, and it's, it's more transparency as to what the costs are actually associated with. So makes sense to me.
Need a motion for it? Or?
Yeah, we'll need a motion to set the fees and escrow policy.
I'll make a motion.
Unless there's other public comment about it.
Public comment?
Yes, no.
That's good.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second.
Al Dyke.
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
Matt Rivera.
Yes.
John Cups. John Leo.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, last item, RRC informational update. The RRC, or the Redevelopment Ready Community, is, the city has committed to it 3 times now. Once in 2019 in May, 2021, I think fall, late fall, early winter, and then 2022 when we accepted the baseline report. This program is a program put together by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation to ensure the city is meeting municipal best practices. Being engaged in the RRC also opens us up to state grants from the MEDC. There are no requirements to apply for or accept these grants, but in addition to giving us best practices, it also allows us to apply for money that we may need for projects that we don't have to accept. And there's been some questions about the RRC from a few residents, and so I'm just going to go over that really quickly for council, because I know council is probably getting some questions as well. So the baseline report, which was issued earlier this year, the city has made steady progress on fulfilling some of those best practices. Those include, we updated our master plan, we created a new public participation plan. For development review, we updated our fee schedule and we posted it online, which we'll do after this meeting since we just approved the new fee schedule. And boards and commissions, we developed council bylaws and we posted all our bylaws on the website. So that's so far what we've done, which the RRC has, program, asked communities to do. It's all about transparency, increasing transparency and streamlining government services and reviews. What elements are left to examine? There's several, but it's updating the zoning code to align with the master plan. We're initiated that process at the master plan level. We're looking at about 2 years. At the planning commission level, we're looking at about 2 years for that. Green infrastructure standards like stormwater control for, looking at pavement and whether impermeable or permeable pavement, a placemaking and additional housing permitted by right. Development review is develop a public guide for development review process, a tracking mechanism for development review projects, and creating a feedback mechanism. And that's something Jeff Grimm, our zoning administrator, is on his task of things to do. Boards and commissions to hold joint meetings. This is one of the RRC requirements. We did a harbor commission and parks joint meeting. We are going to do a zoning board and planning commission joint meeting eventually as well. And create an orientation package for boards. As you see in our tree advisory board appointment, we do have a new member potentially coming on, and if we would have an orientation packet for them set to go, they could easily read it. And said we don't have that. So just to get more organized on some of these things. And also there's an economic development strategy and a marketing plan. So those are some of the big things and key items that the RRC is looking at do. It's not that complicated. I know some people have concerns about, taking money from the state. You don't have to take money from the state. There's no strings attached with this program other than it takes staff time. It takes some time to implement this. And we've recognized that since 2019. This was going to be a several-year project, and we've been working on it for, several years now. But we took a little lull in it during COVID. But we're back at it, meeting Fridays, third Fridays, I think, the second Fridays of the month at 10 o'clock here at City Hall. We have a small committee of staff and a couple council board members. And there is a space for a public member. If there's a member from the public who wants to help us advance this, we've tried to find people in the public that care about this and want to advance this, help city staff advance the RRC program. Please fill out an application and an application to serve on a city board, and we'll consider it. So I don't know if council has any other questions or follow-up or thoughts on that. Just a basic overview.
So we're making progress.
Going in the right direction.
Keep working at it.
All right. Yes, let's go on.
Do we have public comment on this?
Yeah.
I guess my thing is that with the RRC, a lot of people know what that is. And to me, it really talks about the Green New Deal. We just talked about the electrical guy, talking about EV vehicles. Right now, California is huge about electrical cars. And, it seems like this falls into this bucket if you step back. Permeable sidewalks, is that one of the reasons why we're not getting some of the upgrades we're doing? I know some of the checkoff lists, we have to have a triplex, so high density housing is talked about in some of these topics. I know that we might not do all of them, but I know that we probably should bring a little bit more open with the community about the RRC on some of the requirements that we have checked off to see it. Is that on the website to look at that information?
It's right here.
So it's on the website to.
No, it's right here on the screen.
I understand, but my question is to, we just now are talking about this. This has been going on for 2 years. and-
Well, no, Maggie, I'm sorry, we've been talking about this since 2019.
Okay, 2018.
And the meetings, you have attended the meetings, so.
I have attended probably more meetings than most people have. And when you talk about the RRC, people do not know what the RRC is.
Well, Maggie, one thing, because you've made a couple of comments about how nobody knew about the substation and those kinds of things.
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, wait, just one sec, okay? I think people have to take responsibility too, to look at the websites and to listen to council meetings and preferably to come to council meetings if they want to know what's going on. I think RSC, we've been talking about it here at council ever since I got on council. It comes up very often. So I'm a
We're
little.
not into the details of how it changes zoning and how it changes planning. And I know that we just did the master plan.
But it doesn't.
It doesn't change
It's
anything.
up to the city themselves to make the choice about what they want to
Right,
do.
I understand.
And this is a tool to do it, but we don't have to do this. This is something council's decided makes sense.
So I know with the master plan, we talked about on the master plan to have public feedback. We did surveys, right?
Right.
And in the master plan, it says we couldn't get together because of COVID-19, but we could have Zoomed some of these conversations about the master plan.
I think a lot of things were Zoomed, and I came to lots of the meetings. The meetings were Zoomed all the way
Okay.
through, Maggie. I mean, people have to choose to pay attention if they want to know what's going on. I don't think anybody's trying to hide anything from the RRC. I just don't understand why people are so concerned about it. I guess I just don't understand.
I'm on the planning commission and I was in those discussions about the master plan for 2 years.
Yeah.
And those were just like these meetings. I mean, they were public, electronically public. They weren't hidden meetings.
Well, the RRC meetings are not on Zoom.
Yes, they are. They're just not recorded.
Yeah.
So those meetings that you have with your staff that I attended, you said you would not do a Zoom meeting.
No, I
They're
said they would not be
recorded.
recorded.
They're not recorded.
They're on Zoom.
The RRC meetings that you have with your staff members, they're on Zoom.
Yes.
I'll go and look at those.
Not recorded, though. They're on Zoom.
So
You can watch it live.
You can watch it.
Yeah.
Mr. Walter.
Hi, Council, Bill Mulder, 37 West Summit. I've heard concerns like Maggie's about the RRC and how nefarious and secretive it is and how it's going to force low-income housing to be built in the city. How it's going to drive, force us to implement green initiatives that we might not want. Would it be helpful right now to clarify what the RRC does and doesn't do in that regard, Victor?
Well, it doesn't require any kind of low-income housing standards. It requires, as I mentioned here, to have one more housing type of development by right. So that housing could be an accessory unit. It could be multi choose to be a housing type by right. It could be anything the city chooses. There's no low income development. As far as the new Green Deal, that's nothing to do with this. That's politics. This is green infrastructure standards. It's saying, hey, if you put your permeable pavement in your driveway, you may get incentives to do something else on your property. It's a way to curb some of the issues we have with stormwater quality and from a zoning incentive perspective. It's not changing, there's no changing our sidewalks to permeable or impermeable sidewalks. That has nothing to do with our sidewalk replacement schedule. So I'm not sure where these ideas are coming from. The council and staff are always willing to answer those questions.
Well, I think too, it speaks to some of the things that are in our new master plan about affordable housing and housing for all walks. I mean, that's in our master plan, so this is just helping us to fulfill what we've decided we want to do. It's not telling us exactly what we have to do and how we have to do it.
John Fox, 309 Pine Street. My question is, and I have started a couple on Zoom, been here a couple in person. I agree 100% with you, right? You want to get educated. My question is, how do I get educated on this? Is it on the website? If it's not,
It's on the, every
it
time we
should-
meet, it's on the homepage of the website when the meetings are at. And also there's a separate webpage on our website just for the RRC program on our website.
So,
There's all this information's up there.
so that's on the website?
Yep.
That's all I needed to know. And the thing I would suggest is, it's a busy world. Not everybody's gonna make it to a meeting and they might miss on Zoom. So, and I have read the master plan, it's on the site and I appreciate that. So these are the things you wanna have transparency for people. Avoid a lot of some of the conflicts. So.
Can I add, I just want to add 2 quick points here. The first one is no decisions are made and finalized at the redevelopment, our committee meetings. The only thing we do with those is look at best practices and figure out ways that we can meet these requirements and then make those recommendations to the planning commission or city council. So even if nobody attends a redevelopment ready committee meeting ever, but they attend planning commission or city council, they will still know all of the changes that are happening because they are presented at those meetings, discussed at those meetings, and adopted, if so chosen at those meetings. Those meetings are all still recorded. So participation can be done there. And the goal, in my belief, one of the goals here for the redevelopment ready community stuff is providing best practices and ways to better provide information to the public. Everything that's in there is all about not just having a written policy that's in some drawer in my desk as the zoning administrator, but having some clearly identifiable path presented on the website somewhere where somebody has a question of how do I apply for special land use? If I'm too busy to be able to talk to them, they can easily go onto the website and see clearly and concisely what their process is and has to be. So it's all about making things more prevalent to people at the end of the day.
Thanks, John. We do have a comment on from Miranda Miller. Miranda?
Hi, Miranda Miller, 651.
Miranda, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? Hello?
Move on. Yes, there.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? I'm unmuted. Have to use your computer off?
I'll try again. This thing died, so I can't get one in.
Oh. Hello, can you hear me?
I'm gonna find it, I'll never hear the end of that.
Can you turn your computer off a minute? Hello? Hello?
Technical difficulties.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Steve Jones.
All right, Miranda, if you want to try now speaking.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, thank you. In regards to, well, the word transparency has been thrown around here quite a bit regarding the RRC. And I think the gentleman, Mr. Fox, I think might be your name, had mentioned that we all live in a very busy world. And I kindly asked you, Victor, many, many times in emails, which I have, if you would please, with the recording equipment that the taxpayers have paid for, that you would record these meetings, because not everybody, and I have a lot of people who've shown an interest, but they're not able to get there on Fridays at 10 a.m. or watch them on Zoom because they have jobs or out of town or whatever it may be. I think the RRC has a lot more power in shaping and forming Harbor Springs than people even realize. We have an assessor named Pablo, Rachel Roon, who people think she is just a Parks and Recreation director, is actually pretty much running the redevelopment ready committee and going through the best practices. I would urge anybody who's listening, go through the redevelopment ready committee and copy the best practices. I think it's about 39 pages or so. And this will actually, I don't think it's very funny, Victor, by the way, but laughing at me, I don't think that's helping. But you have actually.
Well, Miranda, don't accuse me of laughing.
Excuse me. And the one RRC meeting that I was able to attend because you have canceled the last 3 out of 4. The last one that I went to, I asked you again nicely, trying to explain for transparency, please record these meetings because they are important. And your only reason for not recording these is only because you said you're not required to. Well, as a city employee, I would think you would want everybody to know what is going on. So you don't need to have people saying you're nefarious and all that. Then they can come and listen to the meeting whenever they need to after it took place, if it takes place. So with these 3 out of 4 meetings that have been canceled, the redevelopment ready committee has been making progress with Pablo from Lansing. There have been things going on, requirements being made, Main Street corridor, the DDA is involved. It will give them more grant money to do whatever they need under getting more grants from the state of Michigan, and nothing is free. We have to make the requirement first with the RRC in order to get the money. So there is more to it than just, I'm not saying it's nefarious, but if you want it to be transparent, push that button on the Friday mornings that you're going to have these and record them. I don't know why you're being so obstructive to this. It is a very important thing. If you look at the Harbor Springs website, our page, our web page, it says we are an RRC community. It's a membership. I've spoken to other people in RRCs. They're not really thrilled with what has happened. They don't like it. They don't like where it's headed. So it's not just this fluff thing where you just get grants. There's more to it. Our master plan has to align up with what Pablo from Lansing says. I have a letter from him. He told us the state of Lansing is going to make it much easier for us to go through them if we want to go get a permit to get, to put a new roof on your house. Well, ironically, when Pablo said that to us, we had just gotten a permit to have a new roof put on. We didn't need to go to the state of Lansing. We came right here locally and did it. We don't need Lansing to run every little thing for us. There is more to this RRC than what you are saying. Please start recording them and make it transparent. We're talking about transparency. And again, if you're canceling 3 out of 4, there is activity going on constantly month to month in these RRC meetings, and we should be allowed to know what it is. We should be able to sit in and
Miranda, you need to wrap it up.
That's it, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Good.
All right. City manager report. So we are in the process of conducting interviews for the open police officer and DPW position. And actually we've made some offers. So hopefully we have some acceptances and we'll have some new employees starting here shortly to replace the 2 retirements and 1 resignment there. Primary elections and Headley override ballot proposal are tomorrow. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. There was a minor power outage in the city earlier this week. The electric department spent most of the day, I don't know if it was Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm not sure exactly, but figuring it out and fixing the problem. We meet again on August 15th, but we don't meet again until September 19th as far as a regularly scheduled meeting. Labor Day is on September 5th. So if council wants to meet again between August 15th and September 19th, you can, but that's the schedule. And so far for the boardwalk, we have $132,000 in donations. The most recent large donation was from Gail and Ann Stevens for $25,000. And they're also looking forward to donating more depending on how what the rest of the community does. So that is some updates right there. And we had a Parks Board meeting, a Planning Commission meeting. Planning Commission, we're talking about short-term rental updates to the code, as well as a proposed timeline for our zoning code update. I mentioned earlier about two years is what we're looking at approximately. And I had a few meetings that I attended. That's that. We have one last item, which is, Teresa, I'm sorry we made you sit through all this for. Do you still want to be on the tree board? So the city has one opening for the tree advisory board. John Cassidy, who'd only been on for a few months, he moved out of town for work again. So he still has his home here, but he's no longer going to be a registered voter. So we had opening Teresa Johnson, who lives for the Maple Street. No,
Yes.
Maple Street, yep. Has put in her application. Council, you have that application. And I think she'd be a great fit. We sat down and talked for about 10, 15 minutes, and seems like she wants to be involved, and it's a good fit.
Sure. I'll make a motion that we accept Teresa as our tree advisory board.
And I'll second it. You can second it. One of us will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
That's it.
Okay,
Unless you have new or old business.
do we have any new or old business?
Everybody remember.
Get out and vote. Get out and vote. All right, did that. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Oh, you guys.